Advise when you're ready to copy a number, or you get a call from the FSDO. Is it time to consult an aviation attorney? Let's find out in the hangar. Hello and welcome to In the Hangar. I'm Dan Milliken.
And I'm Christy Wong. Today's episode is brought to you by Gold Seal and iFly GPS. And Dan, we've been asked a lot of questions lately around aviation legal stuff. You guys may or may not have heard there was some incident with the Warrior.
Some incident.
And
that's why I'm so excited about this episode. Actually, from the get-go, I always wanted to try to do an In the Hangar episode with an aviation legal expert, and I'm so thrilled that we have Greg Reigel, aviation attorney. We thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And we got Greg's name. I know this will be a shocker to you, but it actually came about through Brian Turner. Go figure. Brian Turner would know aviation
he's
lawyers.
got a connection, I think.
He does.
Like a kind of like just this whole network of aviation attorneys.
Do you know Brian Turner?
I don't.
Okay, that's probably better that way. Although he'd be probably a very big client for you.
He'd be an excellent client, so.
All right, well, so thank you for coming today. Tell us a little bit about your background and your expertise in doing aviation law.
Okay. When I got out of college, I wanted to be an airline pilot. So I started flying. My dad was actually a pilot and a lawyer, and so I started flying and quickly ran out of money. And
imagine that.
Really?
And it was easier to get student loans to go to law school than it was to continue the flying. So I put the flying on hold. I ended up going to law school. And when I got out of law school, there's thousands of attorneys out there. And so I decided that aviation law was an area where there weren't a lot of attorneys, and it was a good niche to get into. That was right about the time when the government had mandated that the FAA put all of its guidance, regulations, everything online. And so that really leveled the playing field for somebody wanting to get into aviation law versus the big firms that really had, the more expensive access. And so I just decided that's what I was going to do, and I've been doing it ever since.
Great. So what are the main parts of aviation law? Like, why would I need to consult an aviation attorney?
Well, aviation law, aviation is one of the most regulated industries out there. And so you've got that regulatory oversight to deal with. Aviation law, deals with those regulations, but it also touches on contract law and a variety of other laws, but they're in the context of aviation. And so it ranges anywhere. I tell people ask me, what do I do? Well, I help people own, operate, and maintain their airplanes. And that includes regulatory compliance, contracts, the whole range. If it relates to an airplane or an airport, it's probably something I work with.
How much do you do as far as, setting up partnerships or regulating the airplane versus the investigative, oh no, the FSDO's calling me, I need some help and advice?
Yeah, it varies. I do, at least half of my work is structuring ownership and operations and things like that. The enforcement side of it, dealing with the FAA when something has happened, that work has gone down quite a bit since the compliance program went into effect in 2015.
What is that?
Well, so the compliance,
is that the kindler, gentler FAA?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know you've talked about it before, but before 2015, FAA's enforcement was very heavy-handed. Everything seemed to be, if there was a violation, we're going to, take some sort of certificate action or something like that. And in 2015, they finally, from my perspective, started looking in the right direction, said, well, wait a minute, taking somebody out of the game for 30, 60, 90 days doesn't fix things. So what can we do to, rather than beat people over the head, let's figure out how to fix this and make people safer. And so when they put that program into place, it really focuses now on bringing people into compliance and making sure they stay compliant rather than going after their certificates. So,
well,
I was going to say, the questions that we've been getting,
Yeah.
and actually, Christy said we've been getting a lot of legal questions. Really, it's a legal question. It's one from everybody.
Everybody's been asking this question, and I've addressed it a couple of times, but I want to ask you. Everybody wants to know what the name of the individual was that.
Well, and people don't know what we're talking about. So Christy, because some people may have not watched
This
the
is
episode.
absolutely true. This is true.
So there was Christy's plane is in a flying club, and we can talk about the legal things of setting up clubs and things. But a member flew her plane inverted.
Correct.
So that's the long and short of it. And you found out.
I found out, and I was very upset. And we did an episode on that, which we can link
And
below.
have you heard about this?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
How did you find out?
Well, I was doing my research. So
As any good attorney would do.
Yeah. Anyhow, people want to know what the name of the individual who did this was. They've made a lot of comments and justifications as why. As an attorney, what is your stance on that? On me releasing that person's name?
Well, I mean, my conservative approach is you really don't need to. I mean,
Right, okay.
It's not your job.
And that was my first
I don't
instinct.
know all the details. I know enough, but frankly, it doesn't. I'm not sure that it accomplishes much.
Right.
But there's a lot of people that say if you don't say who it is, and something happens, and that individual goes, 6 months from now and kills somebody, the blood's on her hands for not telling the world.
Yeah, but that's not the case. I mean, she doesn't have a legal obligation to release that information. I don't remember whether the FAA was involved or not.
They were.
So in theory, if the FAA has taken some sort of action in one respect or another to try and bring that individual back into compliance, in theory, that shouldn't happen again. So the idea that somehow this individual is going to go out and kill somebody, I think, is a stretch.
My thought process was that I alerted the proper authorities to handle it, and now it's on them. And if the FAA feels that this person can be brought back into compliance, then it's on them. I've done what I needed to do, and I'm over it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the short answer is if the FAA takes some action, they've got more responsibility and obligation from a regulatory perspective than you do. And there's nothing to say that this individual isn't going to learn from this and, be a better pilot moving forward.
Exactly. And honestly, that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that this sets this person straight and on the right path. And hopefully this person will fly again, but will be much safer and smarter moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, we all make mistakes, some intentional, some not.
Right.
There's nothing that prevents you from learning from them, especially in aviation. Right?
Exactly.
I mean, we ideally learn from our mistakes and others' mistakes all the time.
Okay.
All right, next thing I want to talk about is that there was one time that I needed an aviation attorney. Well, more than one time, but there was one time in particular I got a call from the FSDO. And I lost sleep. I thought it was the first time anything had happened. I didn't know about kindler, gentler FAA, and it ended up being pretty much a non-event. But I called. I have the legal services add-on at AOPA, and they hooked me up with a local attorney, who actually didn't make me feel that much better. Yeah, they could fine you. They could. But anyway, all that to say. Is it your experience that it has been a much more kinder, gentler approach?
Yes.
So in this, I'm tying everything together. So in Christy's case, I mean, what do you think is going to happen to this young man?
So if we look at the compliance program, you've got two key elements from the FAA's perspective. Is the individual willing to comply? Are they able to comply? And then we also look at, what happened. How did it happen? Is this an issue where it was carelessness, or it was a lack of knowledge, improper procedures, or was it going from the careless to closer to the intentional or aspect? The further you get past careless, the more likely it is the FAA is going to take some sort of enforcement action. Probably a certificate action where there's going to be a suspension of the airman's certificate for some period of time.
I would think that's the case because it's pretty clear it was intentional.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have to look at, FAA inspectors have, under the compliance program, their criteria they have to go through and check the boxes to make sure somebody still fits within that. And as soon as there's intentional conduct or something along those lines, that typically takes you out of the program.
Which then takes me to another situation that I'm very curious about that actually a lot of people are curious about. You have the Bravo Buster in Vegas last summer. Are you familiar with him? You are, okay. A lot of us think that Kindler Gentler, he's just going to get a slap on the wrist and no certificate. Oh, you think he's going to get... Like what? I mean, and why?
Well, if you listen to the ATC tapes...
Oh, it became intentional.
Yeah. I mean, that's, and that goes to, is the individual willing and able to comply? Now, able, in theory, the airman is qualified, et cetera. But the willingness is where you have the problem. I mean, this individual...
Was clearly unwilling.
Yeah. And that, you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt under the compliance program with that kind of conduct. You're just not. And the majority of pilots are going to agree with that and say, yeah, somebody like that, I mean, I don't want him in the airspace with me.
You know what? I have to agree with that.
Yeah.
Here's a question that we get asked a lot, and it revolves around, is AOPA worth it? Regarding their legal services, would you say that they're beneficial? Is the legal service through AOPA worth the membership?
I think it is, because if you look at... and part of it depends on which plan you get, right? They've got tiers.
Right.
And I'm on their panel attorney list, so I talk to AOPA pilots all the time. If you were to call up an aviation attorney just out of the blue, most attorneys will talk to you for, 15 minutes, half an hour, just as an initial consult. But after that, you're going to be paying them by the hour. And 1 hour is probably going to be more than what you pay for the AOPA Legal Services plan. And under the plan, you're going to get, a number of hours to deal with various legal questions. You're going to be able to call and talk to their staff, who they have attorneys on staff. They're not going to be able to give you specific legal advice, but they'll either be able to talk to you generally or they'll refer you to one of the plan attorneys to talk specifically about your case. So, I mean, it does have benefits. It's not the be-all and end-all, but it certainly, I think it's a valuable benefit for members.
How much does it cost to engage
Per
with
hour.
an aviation attorney?
It depends
Range.
on the
Give us the
aviation
range.
attorney.
Oh, okay.
But what's a good range?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure really it depends on the market, quite frankly, but you could be paying anywhere from, $250 an hour on up, depending on the attorney and depending on the type of representation you need. There are some attorneys that handle aviation that do a broad range. There are others that handle more specific matters, and it really depends on the type of matter and the attorney that you're working with. But like I said, it's even an hour at $250 is
That's
more than what you
more
pay
than you
for
would
the
have paid, yeah.
AOPA plan.
All right, so now moving away from enforcement and over to the other big half of what you do, setting up partnerships, setting up flying clubs and all that kind of stuff. Would you, I can go out, I know how to set up an LLC in the state of Texas. I know how to do some things. Can I get away with just setting up my own partnership? Or do you think it would be always much better to enlist the services of an aviation attorney?
Well, you've got two issues there. One is, can you set up your own partnership corporation, LLC? You can. The bigger issue is, how do you structure the ownership and operation using that entity? This is where people make a mistake all the time. The typical example is, I want to buy an airplane. I've heard that LLCs are going to give me liability protection, so I'm going to buy the airplane, I'm going to put it in an LLC. Well, that's great, but number one, if you're going to be the PIC, the LLC isn't going to give you any liability protection, because as a pilot in command, you're going to have that liability, whether the LLC owns the airplane or not. The other big issue is, who's the operator, right? So if the LLC owns the airplane, how do you as the individual get operational control of that airplane? Okay? The FAA looks at an LLC as a separate individual. So LLC isn't the same as the members. right? So if you are the member and you're flying the airplane, you need to be able to show the FAA that, hey, I'm flying this airplane individually in my individual capacity. I'm not flying on behalf of the LLC. This is a big issue right now because the FAA has really been cracking down on illegal charter. And a lot of that involves aircraft leasing. And part of the problem people have is they think, well, I'm going to put it into an entity and, I'm going to hire the pilots through the entity. Well, now you've set up what the FAA calls a flight department company. That is an entity that's providing transportation, right? It's providing the airplane, it's providing the pilot. The FAA looks at that and says, hey, you need a 135 certificate to do that. So in order to work through that, to be compliant in order to operate under Part 91 as opposed to 135, you need to put some sort of lease in place or an ownership agreement. You need to structure the operation in a way that's going to be legally compliant. And right now the FAA, that's a big hot button for them. They're really going after illegal charter, where in the past, they knew it was an issue, but they really didn't put a lot of muscle behind investigating and enforcement. Well, now they are. And so people who have airplanes owned by LLCs, owned by corporations, you really need to look to make sure that you've got that operational structure set up the right way. Because if, I always tell people, it's not a problem until it's a problem, right?
Right. Right. They could have done it themselves, but when it goes bad, it goes bad.
Yeah, you get ramp checked. And, the inspector starts looking, they look at the registry and see, oh, ABC LLC owns this airplane. Well, who's the operator? Well, if you don't give the right answers to some of those questions, that's when you start having problems.
Wow. Okay, so what are some of the biggest hot button issues that are coming across your desk these days?
Well, the illegal charter is a big one.
Probably, okay.
But it really, not so much illegal charter, but people that have heard about it. And they hear that, unfortunately, in that context, aircraft leasing has gotten a bad rap. And there are a lot of pilots out there that hear aircraft lease, oh, that's illegal charter. Well, no, it's not. It just needs to be structured the right way. And so I get calls from people wanting to make sure that they have it structured the right way, that they have the right lease agreement or use agreement, to make sure that they are doing it the way they're supposed to. Another area, I get calls fairly frequently from pilots about just general things, airspace issues, dealing with inspectors. What else?
Do you ever get questions from people that are like, hey, I read this reg and I have no clue what it says?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So a good example there is the limitations on a private pilot for sharing expenses.
Oh, the pro rata share.
The Flight Now case and the flight sharing cases, those, unfortunately, it's not clear, right? You can look at the regulation and the regulation says this, but how does the FAA interpret that? And, they have put out advisory circulars. There's guidance out there, but trying to mesh all that together to really understand, am I doing this the right way? There are a lot of people that have questions. I mean, some people look at it and say, yeah, I get it. And there are others that say, oh, it's clear as mud.
Oh, one of the questions that I get asked a lot is holding out for my commercial students.
Yeah.
That one, you would think that it's pretty clear. It's not clear. It's very gray.
It is. The FAA has given some guidance on the whole holding out, and that's really where this boils down to, I think. You can kind of deal with the shared purpose and that kind of thing, but, you have to look at, who's getting this message, right, that I'm available to have people fly along with me? Is it just, is it a note on the bulletin board at your local FBO, or is it, out to the internet as a whole? And, unfortunately, that's right. And unfortunately, you've got to kind of look at, what is that market, right? Is it a defined number of people or does it go beyond that? And to the extent that it starts to go beyond that's when the FAA starts looking at it.
I mean, is it this type of situation where you're on Facebook for a group and somebody says, hey, I'm going to go to the Kansas City Chiefs football game. Who wants to go with me and share the expenses? I mean, can they do that? Or is that holding out?
Well, how many friends do you have on Facebook? right? You know,
Yeah,
is it
200 friends,
200
2,000,
you know, well, but it makes a difference.
It does.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I say that, you know, you've got that continuum, right? If I'm, you know, putting that message out to my friends, my 200 close friends on Facebook,
Right.
versus am I putting it out to a group I'm in on Facebook where there's 2,000 or 5,000 members, that's a different
So
context.
just making that post on your own profile versus putting that post in a group is significant.
Could be.
Wow.
Or what if somebody just gets their commercial certificate and they post in one of these big groups, hey, just got my commercial certificate. Who wants to hire me? You know?
Well, but that's different. That's, you know, if you're, who wants to hire me as a commercial pilot to fly for you in your airplane is different than
Right.
I have an airplane, I'm going someplace, and I will take you from point A to point
For
B
it-
for
Right.
for a fee.
some amount of money.
Yeah.
It's a
So you say
different
that some
scenario.
DPEs, though, have given their opinions on that. They've specifically told me you should advise your student not to say X, Y, or Z on Facebook regarding, hey, I'm a commercial pilot, you know, who wants to hire me? Because they said the FAA could, I know, and that's why I said I know this came from DPEs, so.
Yeah, but remember, I mean, a DPE has an authorization from the FAA to conduct examinations. They don't work for the FAA. They don't have the immunity that the FAA has
True.
from suit. And frankly, inspectors aren't much better, right? You can get bad advice from an inspector, and it could be bad, right? They could be telling you the wrong thing. And once it gets further up the food chain at the Flight Standards Office, you may get the real answer, and suddenly you realize you're not doing things the way you're supposed to. And that happens, unfortunately.
I've got one last question, one last social situation that you may or may not be aware of that I'm curious of your take. And I probably think I know the answer, but in San Antonio FSDO, there was a DPE who lost his privileges, and the public was pretty upset about that. Now, I know pretty much the FAA can do, the FSDO can do whatever they want in this regard. And everybody's demanding an answer. They think it's you know, maybe he got fired so that another buddy from the manager can be there and all this kind of stuff. I know that gentleman who did get his DPE privileges terminated has hired lawyers. What do they have? What can they do?
I don't think he has much recourse. I mean,
Yeah.
the FAA has sole discretion in who it gives authorization to be a DPE or in other contexts. So I'm, you know, short of being able to actually prove that there was something improper going on, I think that's going to be a tough sell.
And the FAA is just going to do the strategy of circle the wagons, don't say a word, let the storm blow over.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's unfortunate that, you know, where we currently don't have enough DPEs,
Right.
that somehow the FAA is withdrawing DPE authority. That seems a little silly, but it happens. I mean, and sometimes for
Personal
not the right
reasons.
reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Greg, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. It really opened some eyes to what's going on.
It's great information.
All right. And thank you guys for watching. And please leave a comment if you've been through some kind of hot water with the FAA, or if you've had some strange issues with partnerships and things like that and you wish it had been done differently. Leave your comment below. We'd love to read it. We do read it.
Or
And-
if you've had run-ins with Brian Turner and, you know, need some legal advice.
Yeah, Brian can certainly give that. And so anyway, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.
In the hangar.